With me today is Lisa C. She is here from California. She's the New York Times best-selling author of Peony and Love, Snowflower and the Secret Fan, Flower Net. She also wrote a memoir on Cold Mountain, but she's here today to talk about her latest novel, Shanghai Girls. It is actually a slight change of pace for you, isn't it?
It's set in modern day China, or a little bit more to the modern times. It starts in 1937 in Shanghai, which at that time was the Paris of Asia, this very glamorous city, a city of great diversity, extraordinary poverty on one end, and then just incredible wealth on the other end, and everything in between, and people who'd come from all over the world to be there. So it starts in 1937 with Pearl and May, two sisters, who find themselves suddenly in arranged marriages on their way to the United States.
Now, what inspired you to move to modern times and write about Pearl and May?
Really a few different things. First of all, I was really curious about this time period in Shanghai. But at the same time, I was very interested in what it was like for the Chinese who came to this country. During that period, there was a tremendous amount of racism and prejudice, just on the local level, but also the federal level. You know, we all know about Ellis Island, right? And we all know what it was like to go through there. But in the San Francisco Bay, there was another island called Angel Island, and it was the West Coast equivalent of Ellis Island. But where Ellis Island was seen as a kind of a welcoming place, Ellis Island had opened with the specific purpose of keeping the Chinese out. So at Ellis Island, you answered a standard 20 questions and went through a medical examination, and yes, there were moments of humiliation. But at Angel Island, the Chinese immigrants had to answer anywhere from between 200 and 1,000 standard questions, and they were designed to trick people into making mistakes so that hopefully they could just be sent back. So that was one part of it. Another is that Pearl and May are sisters. I am a sister myself. I'm one of four. And this sibling relationship is typically the longest one that we'll have in our lifetimes. This is the person who should stand by you and love you and support you no matter what. But you know, your sister is also the person who knows exactly where to drive the knife to hurt you the most. So I really wanted to write about that and the good parts of it, but also the kind of dark shadow side of these kinds of relationships that we have. And then at the same time, I was very curious about what's the difference between actual sisters and friends who are just like sisters. Those people that we let into our hearts and who invite us into their hearts.
Now, you start in 1937, Shanghai. That is a time of war. I think a lot of people in the U.S. don't realize that the Japanese have been fighting a war for a number of years before they visited Pearl Harbor.
That's right.
And actually Pearl and May get involved in the initial attack on Shanghai.
Right. They are there out there on the streets when the Japanese first attack in Shanghai. And many people sort of look at this as kind of the beginning of World War II. A lot of people consider that, at least as far as the Japanese were concerned. It wasn't, of course, until, as you pointed out, until Pearl Harbor, that the Sino-Japanese War kind of just rolled right into World War II.
Right. Yeah, there were a lot of little things, pots boiling over. Actually, that's wrong. The Sino-Japanese War was not a little thing, but there were a number of pots that boiled over until we got involved in it.
That's right.
Because that, and all of a sudden, being Chinese was something to be favored.
That's right, because suddenly China and the U.S. were allies. And this is actually when the Chinese Exclusion Act and all of those other laws were finally overturned, was in 1943, because China was suddenly an ally.
Now this takes Pearl and May through World War II in California, where they want to be sure and let everybody know they're Chinese and not Japanese.
That's right.
But it also gets them into the era when all of a sudden China is no longer our friend again.
Right.
and because of those terrible communists that have taken over. So
That's right.
they have to deal with not only all the sister dynamics, there's a lot of
political things that happen along the way to them. And by the end, it's 1957. And it was at that time that the U.S. government started a new program. It was called the Confession Program, which encouraged Chinese who had come here as what were called paper sons, people sort of masquerading as the sons of American citizens, to step forward, confess, and then they would be given their legitimate U.S. citizenship. It was a kind of an amnesty program. And when you hear it that way, it sounds like, you know, sign me up. But in fact, it wasn't enough just to confess about yourself. You were asked to rat out your friends, your neighbors, your business associates, even your own family members. And better yet, if you could say, oh, and you know, I think so-and-so is a communist,
right.
then for sure you would get your citizenship. And this is something that just destroyed communities, ripped apart businesses and families. It's something that even today scholars have written very little about because people don't want to talk about this period. There's still so much shame and embarrassment and guilt about what people did. But how do I say this delicately? I'm a bit of a pest, and I will come and sit on your couch until you tell me your whole life story.
Yeah.
And so I did get people to talk to me about what they went through and what their families went through. And some of these stories were just heartbreaking. One man who was in his 80s, he and his brother had stepped forward 52 years ago. And it was a pretty uneventful story, actually. But he said to me, you know, we have never told our children what we went through. We've never told our grandchildren because we aren't dead yet, so we aren't safe yet. And so that fear, I think, of people, you know, being targets still has stayed with people, with the Chinese Americans in certain parts of the country and of a certain age.
Right. Well, obviously you did a lot of individual research, but I'm sure that you had to force yourself to fly to China and do a little...
Oh yeah, I did. I had to force myself to go there.
Do sort of on-the-ground research.
That's the best part of writing these books, is that I do get to spend a lot of time in China, and I get to see some really amazing things and meet some very amazing people. But I am also part Chinese myself. And so I'm also able to draw on family experiences and certainly things that the family endured.
Well, and as you said, you're one of several sisters, so I'm sure that informed a lot of the interaction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, my sister makes me say to everyone, tell everyone we're not in the book.
Okay. They're not in the book. Well, I want to thank you very much, Lisa, for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Lisa C. has been here talking about Shanghai Girls. You can find this and her other novels at your library and your favorite bookstore.